All right, guys, so today we are going to create a foldable on long versus short term environmental changes. So everybody should have two pieces of plain computer paper, and I'm going to try to make sure that this is up as big as possible. So to create a foldable, you're going to take the paper and you're going to stair step it. So it is probably about right at an inch or so, maybe a little less. And so you're definitely going to want this step. So let me zoom this in so y'all can see. Okay, so everybody make your paper look like this. If you need to pause the video to do so, go ahead and do that. Once you have that, then you are going to take the top and fold it down so that everything seems to be the same. And once you have it about even, go ahead and crease it. Okay? Then you're going to need to take a stapler. Oh, sorry. And staple twice. All right, so now we have created a foldable with 1, 2, 3, 4 tabs, right? 3 tabs and a cover. So because we are actually comparing long versus short term, I actually want you on the 3 tabs to take the line and trace it all the way down. On the left side, we're on the first tab, we're going to write long-term changes. Adapt on the second tab. And extinction on the third. And again, this is all on the left side. On the right side, we're going to write short-term changes. Move and die. Okay, so once you finish this, you have your foldable pretty much set up. The only thing you might want to do is when you lift up this first tab, you probably want to continue the line on every single page because we are going, every page is going to be divided into 2 sides, short versus long. Okay, so this is how it should look. I'm going to switch over to the PowerPoint now where you are going to actually fill in all the information where I tell you to do so. Okay, so if you need to pause the video at any time, please go ahead. All right, so let's get to the PowerPoint. All right, so long-term versus short-term. Go ahead and write this paragraph on the very top cover, that flap that we didn't write anything on because everything else should look the same. So it should be long-term and short-term changes in the environment can affect individual organisms and their traits of their future offspring. Nature is always changing. So go ahead and pause the video and write this entire sentence or sentences on that very top flap. Okay, so what we're going to talk about today really is going to bring in a lot of the 7th grade when we kind of talked about traits. So for right now, you're going to lift that first tab up, and we are going to focus on the long-term changes side, which is going to be on the left side. So I need you to write everything that you see here on that first tab. So long-term changes can affect an entire species. And what is important about that is because they are long-term environmental changes, that means it's not going to affect just one individual organism. It is going to affect the entire species. Environmental changes happen slowly over time, and they can affect organisms over generations. So examples of some long-term changes could be climate change, deforestation, urbanization, things that take a really long time to occur but can affect the entire species over that time. So go ahead and pause this video and write these 3 things, not just what's in red, but all 3 under that tab. And again, if you're not sure where you're writing it, right here. So I wrote that whole first sentence here. You're going to lift it up, and you're going to start to write all those 3 things on this tab right above long-term environmental changes. Okay? All right, so let's go to the other side, on the right side, and talk about a short-term change. Well, just like you can imagine, a short-term environmental change, it's not going to take near as long. And so because of that, it's only going to affect an individual species, meaning an individual organism, like one person, instead of our entire humanity. Environmental changes that happen very quickly, and they often affect organisms immediately. Examples could be like a forest fire, floods, that kind of thing. Something where the cause and the effect are going to be immediate, not over a long period of time. So pause the video and go ahead and write this down on the right side. All right, so go ahead and take that short and long-term changes tab and fold it up. And now we're going to write long-term adapt on the left. So the definition of adaptation is any physical or behavioral change that helps organisms to survive in their environment. Which leads us into natural selection. Natural selection is when organisms are suited to a particular environment, are better able to survive. And therefore, if they're better able to survive, then they're able to reproduce and pass on their genetic material. So remember from 7th grade, we said that the entire goal of every living thing is to survive, to pass on its DNA. That's what it wants to do. Well, sometimes nature selects particular traits that will help it move on. So let's take an example and look at the moths, okay? In England, back before the industrial period, there were a bunch of trees and they had a lot of lichens growing on them. So there were 2 types of moth, the white moth and the black moth. Well, as you can imagine, when the trees were very light in color, the black moths just stood out. So birds would constantly eat them. So the white moth, which is actually right here, was very camouflaged. It was adapted to its environment. So therefore, birds wouldn't see it as easily. And so there were more that were able to survive to pass on their DNA. So over a long period of time, there were more white moths than black because their traits were favorable by the nature. Then when the revolutionary period came and everybody started burning factories and coal, all the trees became very, very dark and the lichen died because of all the carbon dioxide being put into the air. And now all of a sudden nature has switched. The white moths were sticking out like sore thumbs and the black ones that had survived were blending in. And so now the white moths were beginning to be eaten away because they stuck out, so therefore they were not able to pass on their genetic material. So, in a long-term environmental change, an organism either has to adapt, okay, or go extinct. So go ahead and flip up to the extinction tab. So what does extinction mean? Extinction means gone forever. If a species cannot adapt to the environment that is changing, they will die out. They will go extinct, meaning that species and that organism can never come back. Okay, this type of deer, it is now extinct due to deforestation. The passenger pigeon, it actually went extinct because of urbanization. Now we know lots of pigeons have adapted to living in cities and surviving on trash and food, but they obviously adapted, so therefore they didn't go extinct. Where the passenger pigeon was not able to adapt, so therefore it did go extinct. So a long-term change, I just kind of want to review everything on the left-hand side, is something that takes a really long time to affect, and animals have 2 choices. You either adapt or you go extinct. Notice it's talking about the entire species, the whole population, not just one individual organism. Okay, so let's go back to short term, and we're going to go back up 1 page over to move. Now remember, short-term environmental changes are environmental changes that happen very quickly and they affect the organism immediately. So, like a forest fire or an oil spill, organisms can move to another area to survive. So, in the example of this elephant, if there is a forest fire, obviously they're going to run away. And if they can move, they're going to be able to survive and live. However, if they cannot move and get out of the situation, then they are going to die. And we're going to put this one on the very bottom tab. Organisms cannot move, have nowhere to go. So an example in this very sad picture was a huge population of deer. This was during a forest fire. They actually were trapped and surrounded by flames from all angles, and they suffocated from the smoke. And rescuers later found the pile of bodies from, they weren't even burned, but they died from the smoke inhalation. So if they were not able to move, they died. Over here is a picture of a bird that didn't make it in an oil spill. So unlike long-term, short-term is only going to affect individual species. Now, because this huge population right here of deer died because of that forest fire, does that mean every deer in the entire world all of a sudden just dropped down and died? No, they're not going to go extinct because of this short-term change. That mini population might, but the entire species wouldn't. Where if it is a long-term change, it will. Okay? All right, so on the very back, and let me show you here, I want you to turn your foldable over to the very back, and we are going to create a Venn diagram. So I just want you to draw 2 circles. Okay? We'll label this one long term, and this one is short term. And then obviously in the middle is both. Okay? So I want you to look at these. And again, you only have to write the letter. You're not going to have to write the entire description. But I want you to place whether they belong in short term, long term, or both. So A is climate change. B, drought. C, hurricane. D, can cause extinction. E, can recover from a change in a short time. That's kind of a dead giveaway. F, floods. G, can cause permanent change to an ecosystem. H, ice age. I, volcanic eruptions. J, can cause the genes of the organism to change. K, can cause the genes of an entire population to change. Notice the difference here. Organism, entire population. L, seasons. M, forest fire. And N, deforestation. So go ahead and pause the video and just place the letter if you think it is short term, long term, or both. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and end it. If you have any questions, rewind. Just when you're finished, you can turn your foldable in. And then Monday, y'all will be going over another lab to help show how genes can change. I will see you later.